what kind of Israel I would long for. So it's an Israel where people were able to expand their hearts and hold more place for more suffering. Not because there should be more suffering, but because maybe if people could expand their hearts and open in a kind of unthreatened way their hearts to the suffering that someone is experiencing, they would actually facilitate a whole lot less suffering. Mm-hmm. I'm blessed to have siblings and friends who are doing the holy work to alleviate poverty or defend people who are in threat of being deported, by ICE or whatever it is. Mm-hmm. And that's not to minimize the importance of the actual work, but it is to say that lots of times looking at someone is an enormous, enormous, enormous act of bravery and compassion. And that's something that, that we can do more often.
That was Rabbi Leon Wiener-Dow from a conversation we had in late March 2026 during the second round of war with Iran. Our conversation was inspired by the song All You Children, which was itself inspired by Psalm 65 and was written by Liz Hanlon and me. I'm Shep Rosenman, and this is The Rest is Commentary, where we explore what songs inspired by the Psalms or Tehillim inspire in my guests. Leon is a rabbi, educator, and author who brings deep Jewish learning into real life with warmth, clarity, and insight. He directs the Beit Midrash at Kolot, a Jerusalem-based organization that focuses on training leaders using Jewish texts to explore principles of governance. He teaches at Binah's secular yeshiva in Tel Aviv and serves as a research fellow at the Shalom Hartman Institute. Rabbi Wiener-Dow is the author of The Going, a meditation of Jewish law, which won a National Jewish Book Award and which I thought was fabulous. He's also the creator and host of Podrash, a podcast that brings Jewish tradition into conversation with contemporary ideas. He received rabbinic ordination from Rabbi David Hartman and earned his doctorate from Bar Ilan University. He lives in Jerusalem with his wife and 5 children, and as you'll hear, loves basketball and coffee. We discuss the power of choosing hope, living in a time of conflict, the tension between reality and aspiration, the role of halacha in daily life, expanding our hearts and truly seeing each other, love as a transformative power, and so much more. Let's begin by listening to All You Children.
Monkeys, all you squirrels, all you parrots, children of the world, rise up as high as can be and shake that kite right out of the tree. All you lemurs, all you gannets, all you bullfrogs, children of the planet, rise up as high as can be and shake that kite right out of the tree. Hope is a kite up in a tree, waiting for a gust of wind to shake it loose and set it free. There's a kite up in a tree, waiting for a gust of wind to shake it loose and set it free. All you starfish, all you dolphins, all you minnows, children of the ocean, rise up as high as can be and shake that kite right out of the tree. Hope is a kite up in a tree, waiting for a gust of wind to shake it loose and set it free. Up in a tree, waiting for a gust of wind to shake it loose and set it free. All you human astronauts, time to have some second thoughts. All you children of the sun, none of this can be undone. Hope's a kite up in a tree, loves the wind, go set it free. Set it free. All you krakens, all you centaurs, all you dragons, children of the stars, rise up as high as can be and shake that kite right out of the tree. Hope is a kite up in the tree, waiting for a gust of wind to shake it loose and set it free. Hope is a kite up in a tree, waiting for a gust of wind to shake it loose and set it free.
Hello, my friend. It's so good to see you.
Shep, it's great to see you. Thanks for having me.
Oh, it's my pleasure. Really, truly. So I always start these with the same question, which is in the same way that the psalmist wrote
Samachay, 65.
65. I was inspired with my co-writer, Liz Hanlon, to write All You Children. And my question to you is, what did All You Children inspire in you? And therefore, what did Samachay inspire in you? And is there a difference between them?
I can say what the song inspired in me because of the topic of hope, which I've spent a lot of time thinking about over the past couple of years. I think I told you in a different conversation that if I were to find it in me to write anything about my life in Israel over the past couple of years, it would be called Life Without a Horizon. And so the idea of hope, and I've been doing some teaching on hope, but hope is a discipline and is a practice rather than as a disposition, is something that I'm very, very interested in. And so what the song inspired in me was a kind of calling to engage in the work of hope. And also there's something obviously in the song as you express it, that it's kind of a world calling. It's kind of a nature, a calling to nature and a calling to all creatures to release hope, and to release hope is a power. And so there was also something inspiring for me in that image of hope is something that's caught up in a tree. Those of us who have children who have flown kites, and that really, really nasty reality when a kite gets stuck in a tree and you're down here and helpless and you're trying to pull it that way and you're trying to pull it that way and this way, and all it seems to do is to be getting further and further entangled. So that kind of directive, right when you're on the precipice of total despair, because it seems to actually be more entangled than it was at the beginning, and you're afraid that if you pull too hard, the string's going to break. So kind of all of those thoughts and feelings were you managed to evoke and pull out in me. So thank you for that.
Of course. I mean, Liz, my co-writer on this, really gets the credit for these lyrics.
Mm-hmm.
I just sent her a few chapters of Tehillim, and this is what came out. I'm very good about tracking the development of these lyrics, but the program I use, Master Writer, allows you to do versions, and my first version is blank other than the Tehillim. So I have no idea what the differences are between the first draft and the final draft. So she gets that credit, and that's important because I'm going to make the argument that these are mostly not my words. These are Liz's words. And my role in this was to kind of come up with the music that goes along with this.
Mm-hmm.
And to what I think you said we'll get to, and I am very interested in the homework, but for me, it really all kind of centers on Shomea Tfilah Adecha Kol Basar Yavo'u, which Koren translates as all humankind comes to you, you who hear prayer. Now, Kol Basar to me is much more than humankind. It's all creatures.
Yes.
And I think that that's what Liz was picking up on too.
Mm-hmm.
And the embedded within that phrase is this notion of hope to me. When we pray, there's hope that we're going to be heard. When we ask our partner, life partner or a business partner or someone you're in conversation with to change their perspective, to behave differently, it's wrapped up in the hope that change is possible. So I think it's not more complicated than that for me in terms of the connection between the two. But obviously this is a very rich parak of Tehillim, talking about creations and about creation, about the nations. And that, of course, gets us into a much bigger conversation. And I would love to turn to that. We're speaking in this incredibly difficult moment. Do you want to give folks a sense of the timing of this?
Yeah, so we're recording this on March 11th. So we are in, what is it, day 12 of the war, of the, I don't even, I was in an afternoon meeting when someone said, good morning, like my sense of, we're here in Israel, we're kind of experiencing what so many people worldwide experience during COVID, of just like your sense of time is totally warped, because you're not going about in and out in your normal routine, and nights you're woken up a lot because the sirens go off, and even if the siren doesn't go off, because of an Iranian missile coming in. I'm in Jerusalem, so Jerusalem is relatively tame compared to Tel Aviv or Modi'in in the center of Israel. But if we have 24 hours without a siren that goes off to send us to the safe room, then that's rare. And if we sleep through the whole night, then that's you kind of wake up in the morning. It's kind of like, when we had small kids and you wake up in the morning, you think, wow, the whole night went through and we didn't wake up. This is amazing. Let's, say a special bracha. So, so that's the moment that we're in. I do want to go back to what, specifically to the verse that you were looking at, verse 3, Shomea Tfilah Adecha Kol Basar Yavo, that this sense that all flesh, right, will come to God who hears prayer. So that's a very powerful image. I mean, what I would say is what grabs him about that verse are two things. Number one, the point that you made, that it's kol basar, all flesh, which is all creatures, which does connect to the lyrics that Liz wrote, I think. And the other is Shomea Tfilah. Like, I don't know, the image that comes to mind is that we pray and almost the deepest aspiration and deepest hope we have is actually just that it's heard, not that it's even answered, like just, I mean, I don't know, maybe I'm revealing the fact that I've been married for 31 years, but there are these arguments you have with the spouse where it's just like, do you hear me? All I need to know, like, I don't need you to understand me even, right? I just want to know, did you actually hear what I just said? Right. And so there's something, defining God in the moment of prayer as Shomea Tfilah, as the one who hears prayer, is, it sounds minimalist, but it's actually like, wow, if I could know that God hears that prayer, then I would come, like that's a prayer worth saying, and that's a God worth praying to.
I love that. I've always, in the context of the Shema, like there are different verbs in Hebrew for hearing, for listening. And I've always understood, like, okay, listen means you just have to engage in the act of listening to the words, but not deeply hearing them, not taking them into your heart.
Right.
And lishmoa to me always, like, if you will, and I don't know if there are other verbs, but listen is ta'azin, like, just listen.
Right.
Pay attention for a moment, but don't take it in. But
Right. Bend your ear.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But shomea to me means you don't necessarily need to agree, but you need to really ingest it, internalize it before rejecting it,
Right.
or rejecting it, which is why, our semi-credo is Shema Yisrael.
Right.
Like,
right.
Really take it in.
Yeah.
God is, our God is oneness, is the way I like to translate it.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it's interesting, there's three plausible words in Hebrew which are listening related, right? There's lahakshiv, which is we would translate it probably as listen, but it comes from, the root in that is keshev, which is attention, right? So to pay attention or to give it your attention. La'azin, which you just mentioned, Shep, which is, we hear the root ozen, which is ear, right? Which is to lend your ear or bend your ear. And I agree with your understanding, which is that really is just a matter of, are you making the effort to hear the words that I just articulated? And then I agree with you 100% that this idea of lishmoa, to hear in that sense, is a deeper sense of, I hear what you're saying, and as you said, I might not agree with it, but it's kind of, I would say, the cognate, the sensory parallel to being seen. I think that as human beings, certainly as children, but also as adults who are really just grown up children in older bodies, just this deep, deep desire that we have to be seen. To be seen by the person that we're working with, to be seen by the person that we're in relationship with, to be seen by our parents, to be seen by our children as a person, not just as a parent.
Mm-hmm.
That deep, deep longing, like you don't even have to pay full attention to me. Just do you see me, right? And I think that there's kind of the, there's a cognate or parallel here of being heard.
Mm-hmm.
And that in that sense, the greatest gift is, can you hear me? Do you hear me? Can you actually say, it's not that I agree with you. It's not that I'm going to do what you want. It's just, God, do you hear me? Or that being kind of the deepest, aspiration or the greatest thing that we could say about God is that God hears our prayers.
Yeah, that's beautiful. And it ties in for me to this notion of hope, which again, you're in Israel, connects back to the language chosen as the anthem.
Yeah.
Hatikva, right? Liotam chofshi be'artzenu, to be a free nation in our land, in Zion, which again, even Zion, sure, it brings us back to the past of the past Jerusalem, but it also brings this hope of the future, because our basic theology is that one day we're going to come back to this, without getting into Mashiachist language, extremist Zionistic language. Our theology is based on the hope that one day the Mashiach will come, all peoples will be free, and all people will be pointing towards God. All that requires hope. And it's been 2,000 years and we're still hoping.
Right. Yeah. And Buber has this great sentence, and I'm probably going to get it wrong, but he says, Israel would lose its own self if it replaced Palestine with Zion, and it would lose its own self if it replaced Zion with Palestine. That is to say that there's a part of our aspiration for Zionism, or for Zion, which is what in Hebrew we call artzi, or gashmi, like gashmiut, right? Like it's very material, and the land of Israel is it's an actual place where we inhabit space, and we want to be able to, have, traffic jams, and we want to be able to build a home, and we want to have, be able to step on each other's toes. It's physical space, right? But it's so much more than that, right? And so I think that in the life of hope, a lot of what we often deal with is that, that kind of rubber band bridge, which is connecting this reality as it is right now with some kind of, reality that we're aspiring to, or that we're hoping for, or that we're praying for, and it's not within reach.
For some reason, this is evoking your book, The Going. I know you've done a lot of writing articles, and you've written in Hebrew and in English. I've read summaries of some of these things, but I've read The Going. I feel like I may be misquoting or misremembering, but the whole notion, and you're a big Rosenzweig guy, I think that becomes clear there.
It's true.
So can you share with me how these things relate? Or share with the audience how these things relate while I get more coffee?
Yes. First of all, coffee is holy, but no, it is. I remember, sorry, I'm going to interrupt my own thought. And I remember Rabbi Hartman of blessed memory, David Hartman. So I had the privilege of learning with him, and he would lecture, and there would be, 250 people in the room. And one time, it must have been a Monday morning, because Sunday night was my basketball night. And so he said to me, I showed up in his office, and he said, "You weren't in my lecture last night." And I couldn't believe that, with 250 people in the room, he noticed that I wasn't there, and I thought for a second, and I was like, I'm just going to tell the truth. And I said, listen, Sunday night's basketball night, that's when I play with the guys. And he said, oh, I understand, and I thought to myself, how lucky I am to have a rabbi who, because he used to play basketball. He would joke that's how not joke. He was being serious that was how he got into Yeshiva University on a basketball scholarship. So anyway, basketball is holy and coffee is holy. So here's what I would say about how Rosenzweig kind of fits in. And I will say parenthetically, or maybe apologetically, that Rosenzweig is kind of notoriously difficult to understand, and so therefore also to explain, and which is why I usually try not to teach Rosenzweig or mention Rosenzweig too much. But the question is apt, and so I'll try to answer it. Rosenzweig has this idea of the Jewish people anticipating redemption. That is to say, there is some future that we long for, a redeemed future. And we can talk about in a second what that means. And that what the Jewish people do in this kind of remarkable and unbelievable way is to anticipate redemption. And when he says anticipate redemption, he means to bring some piece of that into reality now. And so, and what I would say regarding, and in that sense, that's why I said your question is apt, because that tension that I was just talking about is exactly the fact that we have these moments of completeness and fullness, these really fleeting moments of fullness in our lives. And it can be like this moment when we react exactly the way we wanted to react, or when we are present in the fullness that we really, really aspire to be, or when we're in the flow in work, or whatever it is. But they're almost always really, really fleeting moments. They don't hold for very long. And that's both, it's the kind of double-edged sword of the cherubim in Gan Eden, because, on the one hand, we had some sense of, oh, it is possible, right? I just felt it. But then it's frustrating because it's such a small portion. It's such a deferred pleasure, and not pleasure in a low sense, pleasure in a high sense, And so this sense of, oh, well, it could be that way. Why isn't it that way more often? Why isn't that all the time, right? And so in a certain sense, if I could and I'll just finish with this, in a certain sense, Shabbos is that, right? Like where we have this moment, me'en olam haba, right? We have some sense of, some momentary glimpse into what a redeemed world would look like. And, but that's, what can you say? You get Shabbos once a week, and even on Shabbos, there's arguments, and even on Shabbos, there's, I don't know what,
So one of the questions that I always wrestle with is, well, what exactly does the verb Talmud Torah mean? Does it mean the learning of, the teaching of, or the engagement with? And I think that you can make arguments for each of them, and it ties so beautifully into my read of your book, The Going, it's about lived experience. Halacha isn't this static platonic or concept that's a virtue. It's something you live. The notion of commandedness, if I'm remembering the book, I read it like shortly after you sent it to me, so like 10 months ago.
That's amazing that you remember. I forget things the next day, literally. So
it's weird. I forget my keys as I leave the house. I'm really bad with that. But when I read concepts that just like resonate, they stay with me. Of course, until I forget them. But you've been on my mind, so it's bubbled up. Am I getting that right?
Yeah. So what I would say in response. Well, let me start. I'll get back to the going in a second, but it's funny when you said Birkot Torah. So the bracha that you very beautiful, the beautiful bracha that you quoted, is Elu she'adam ochel perotehem ba'olam hazeh ve'keren kehem lo la'olam haba. Right. So also the image. It's what I want to add to what you said of the things that are mentioned is the image of that you can eat the fruits of the benefit of that action now, but somehow you never actually dip into the keren. What's the keren called in English? What's the word? On the investment, right? There's the
principle.
The principle, exactly, right. Okay, so that the idea, the image that's brought forth in this blessing is that you can eat the fruits, you can eat the interest in this world, but the principle remains intact in the next world. And so it's this image of these are actions that you do that are constantly, no matter how much you eat, it's as if you're making so much interest that you could actually never eat your way to the principle, right? And the principle is going to stay with you in the world to come. And so, that image, that bracha, that blessing that you mentioned is beautiful because it's kind of stating that there is this world to come, and there are certain ways of being in this world which are so profoundly constructive and so profoundly spiritually aligned that you're going to ride their wave well into the next world, because that's exactly what those kinds of actions are what make the next world into what it is. That's that redeemed reality, I think, right? Where someone brings peace between a neighbor, between two neighbors, or where someone respects their parents, even when their parents are driving them crazy, which is, of course, by definition, what parents do to children, right? And so, to respect your parents, there's no commandment to love your parents, right? You just have to respect them, right? Because we know, like, loving them, there's no chance, but respecting them, even though they're driving you crazy, I mean, that's a serious act, right? So anyway, but the other thing that I was going to say is when you said the bracha on learning Torah, and I'll say something about Talmud Torah in a second also, but when you talked about the bracha of learning Torah, I thought you were talking about the bracha before you mentioned which bracha you were talking about. I thought you were talking about the bracha that you say when you have an aliyah, and then I was thinking v'chayei olam nata b'tochenu, that God implanted, and that is very Rosenzweig, that God planted eternal life in our midst. And that is to say that there are certain things that we can do in this world, and this gets back to what we were talking about before. There are certain things that we can do in this world where we increase the probability, I'll say it that way, that these moments that we have of fullness, of tasting what a redeemed world or what a redeemed way of being in this world would be like, we increase the likelihood that they're going to take place, or we increase their staying power. It's what Rosenzweig, Rebbe Nachman also has this beautiful Torah, I think it's Torah Samach Bet, I don't remember, in the first part of Likutei Moran, where he talks about he says, like when you start the day and you're kind of overwhelmed with everything that you have to do, he says, you can enter into each task. And I mean, this is my rephrasing of what he says, but basically he says time kind of expands when you enter into that. And so there is this way, and Rosenzweig very much has this sense of the present moment, but there is this way in which I think that when we are in these very, very unique and special and powerful moments, that our sense of time freezes and our sense of that moment expands. And so in that sense, getting back to this whole topic of, the next world or hope and what we're hoping for, there is some sense of like, okay, like time has stopped for a second because we've reached the destination.
Mm-hmm.
And this is the final thing I'll say, which is
No, it's not, but that's okay.
well, I mean, the final thing that I would say about with this particular thing, because I'm bringing it back to what you asked about the going, which is my editor the publisher was not terribly happy with that title, and I try to be a easygoing guy, and I wasn't so easygoing about changing the title. There was a lot of pushback, and I insisted that it be the going.
It's perfect.
But what I was really with the title trying to say is that there is this way in which in this world, what we are doing in this world is going from one place to another, and we are constantly on the way. And that sense of constantly being on the way, right? Halacha is the walking or being on the way, right? Uvelechtecha v'derech, when you're going along the way.
Which is a quote from Shema.
From the Shema, that's right. Thank you. And from Deuteronomy. And so this gets back to this same idea of hope and the elastic bridge connecting us to some alterity, which is the one that we want to be, which is we just don't get there.
Mm.
And like I think the fact that we just don't get there in our world, where we live in a world of instant gratification, the idea of not getting there is just what a terrible punishment that is. Right. And I think that I will say this. I think that if I could contextualize it, or if I could connect what I'm saying to Israel, I will say, I think one thing that people who don't live in Israel tend to like about Israel when they come and visit, or Israelis, is that the sense of like, I have no idea what's going to happen tomorrow. So I'm just going to really be focused on right now. And I'm going to go out, like, yes, there's a war going on, but I'm going to go sit in a cafe, or I'm going to have like a meal or whatever it is. And I think that there is sometimes in a really bad way, because Israelis aren't good at thinking too much about the future. Like if we did that well, then we'd have a high-speed rail system here. But the flip side is that we're really good at being fully present in the present.
Yeah.
Even though the future is not only unclear to the extent that there's anything to be seen, it's kind of ominous.
Mm. And so to that, all that evokes the following in me. First, if we could build the future in a way that were up to you, it would include high-speed rails in Israel. Mm-hmm. What else would it include? And please use that as an opportunity to talk about the work you're doing in the Otef with Kolot.
Mm-hmm. Sure. So we're doing work in the health professions in the North. And what I would say is that the topic of despair or hope and the need to cultivate hope is incredibly, incredibly important. It's a big part of what we do, because apparently I'm not the only person who would give the title to the last couple of years as Life Without a Horizon. Like there's a deep sense, the way that I said it. I was actually just a couple of days ago having conversation with, you probably know Arnie Eisen. Yeah. So he and I were just touching base, and I said, he asked about the atmosphere here, and I said, I personally, feel I look at the despair kind of head on, but I think that for a lot of people, it's kind of in their peripheral vision all the time. Like sometimes when we have something in our peripheral vision that we actually just sense that there's something there, and it's kind of bothering us, but we never actually turn our heads to look in that direction. So I think that that's what's going on here for many, many Israelis. This sense of, that our oldest daughter got married in the first week of the war, mm-hmm. and October 12th. She was supposed to get married on the 15th, and then they moved it up because it was going to get canceled anyway. But the act of marrying someone is the act of kind of making decision, which is all future oriented, right? In other words, that's what a marriage is. A marriage is saying, I am now publicly defining my life from here on out is in relationship with you.
Mm-hmm.
At least that's my aspiration. I'm declaring that aspiration, right?
Yeah.
And there's something incredibly powerful to have experienced that in that moment. But I think that many, many Israelis are having a really, really difficult time. Not just, I mean, to get through the day and to have coffee, that's okay. That we're able to do pretty well. But to actually really, really roll up our sleeves and convince ourselves that there's a plausible, desirable reality that we could be living here 10 or 20 or 50 years down the line, that just seems like such a tall order that, I'd rather just, go get coffee right now,
Well, but so it's one of the questions that this evokes for me is you used some just fabulous language, cultivating hope. You look at despair head on rather than having it in your peripheral vision.
Mm-hmm.
What inspires you to choose hope when you're looking at despair head on?
Like, I'll say this, and here I am going to quote Rosenzweig, right?
Mm-hmm.
He has an essay called "The Builders," which is infinitely more accessible than his book "Star of Redemption." And in "The Builders," he talks about, because he's in the milieu of existential philosophers, and by which I mean that we define ourselves through choice and through the choices that we make. And he says that he has this notion called ability. And usually when I teach this text to students, I used to anyway, I say, what do you think of if I use the term ability? And mostly what they think of is like capability. Like, am I able to dunk a basketball? My my college roommate and I would always say, oh, would we rather be able to go to an Ivy League school or dunk a basketball? Close call, I really would like to be able to dunk a basketball, but anyway, I cannot dunk a basketball. Most people think of it as ability as that. Do you have the ability, the capability of doing that? And Rosenzweig says, no, ability is that which you cannot not do. And I think that there are certain, and these are deep existential choices that we make, that we simply cannot live our lives otherwise. Those are the really significant moments in our life or choices that we make in our life, right? Like I spent a year, I did a postdoc at Berkeley, and I would say that there were two great gifts of that year. The first is that I really wanted my children, I feel like what Israeli Jews lack is the sense of learning and experiencing what it is to be a Jew in a non-Jewish majority. So the first and most important thing was that our 5 children got an entire year of that gift of learning and exploring and understanding what it is to be a Jew in a deep sense in a world that's not Jewish. Because in Israel, you can kind of forget that the rest of the world is not Jewish, at least, on a daily basis. But the second thing that I got, which is apropos what I'm saying right now, is that I got to look at the life that I did not choose and kind of affirm my choice. I mean, that's what ended up happening. Maybe it could have upended me and made me think gosh, maybe I should be living in the States and in Berkeley, California, which is just an amazing place. And I think if I, don't want to put down Los Angeles, but I think I'm in Northern California, I live in Southern California. But anyway, for me, living in Israel is something already from age 16 when I decided I was going to live in Israel. It's just something that I could not do. So I think that there's a way in which those are the gifts of the very, very deep choices that we make, is to say something that I have to be doing. I look at despair and I don't really believe that it's an option that I can play out. And so I get up in the morning and I surround myself. I mean, I will say that especially during the first part of the war, we started at Kolot, we started the Restart program, I think in May 2024, if I'm not mistaken.
Mm-hmm.
And it was really early on in the war, well before the people from that region had begun moving back. So everyone was displaced.
Right.
And we were doing it, we were conducting it in Sderot. So we were actually, there would be red alerts all the time when we were doing it.
For those who don't know, where is Sderot?
Sderot is I would say probably about I don't know, maybe about 8 kilometers from Gaza.
Mm-hmm.
And when you have red alert there, you have 30 seconds. You don't have a long time to get to a safe room before the missile strikes. But what was absolutely, and these were really in the kind of I think at a certain level, the darkest days of the war. And to me, the act of surrounding myself with these people who I would say were like-minded in the sense of it's not that they didn't have moments of breaking down and losing a sense of agency or capability or purpose or calling things into doubt. But they are people who it's just not an option for them. Not only not to live there, but this is really a community of people who know each other and they meet each other, and not just on Facebook, and of called Imahot Otef, mothers from the Gaza envelope region. And so they are constantly sharing with each other advice and questions and about what it is to raise children there and whether they're being terrible parents by making that choice. But it's not just that they chose to live there. It's that it's that they are all fully committed to making the place not just more inhabitable, but genuinely good. And so for me, I would say that was and continues to be kind of a balm for me. That tends to be what gets me through the day, is to, just kind of maximize my time in the presence of these people who are really, really focused on the world as it could be, and on trying to inch the present world closer to there.
Yeah, that's beautiful. It evokes in me the word amen. First of all, our primary rabbi, and someone Rabbi Sharon Brous, wrote this wonderful book called The Amen Effect, which I'm oversimplifying the thesis is just show up, be there for people. But amen is one of these fascinating words that has multiple uses. So there's amen as in, yep, here I am. There's ne'eman, which is faithfulness. There's omen, or faithfulness or trustworthiness. There's omen, which is the craftsman, the skilled worker. And I think what you're describing kind of packages all of those things together, because you are seeing the people in the Otef. You're showing up, which is one version of amen. You're helping them and training them to do the work, which is an omen. And they're doing the work, which is another omen. And finally, you're all choosing faith, if you will. Yachel Yisrael el Adonai or Kavel Adonai. These are both expressions of hope that if you do the work, this better future will come. So it's really beautiful.
So first of all, in all honesty, you're giving me too much credit. Like sometimes people, I ride my bicycle and people think, it's because your commitment to the environment and this and that. I'm like, I just don't like sitting in cars and traffic. I can get from my house in South Jerusalem to the train station in 25 minutes on my bike, and it would take me 40 in a car. So that's how I do it. And the reason that I surround myself with these people from Restart is because it's just feeds and nourishes me.
Right. That's really beautiful. And I think that, obviously you guys are feeling this in a very extreme way. Look, when the news came out of the Iran war, I want to kind of start with October 7th. The news came out about October 7th. I reached out to my friends and family in Israel, just one part of the world. I don't have any friends who live in Gaza. I don't have any friends who live in the territory controlled by the PA. So I wasn't reaching out to anyone there. I know Palestinian Americans who live here, but I don't know anyone there. Then when the conflict expanded to Lebanon, again, I'm reaching out to my cousins whose spouses were called up and sent to Lebanon. And I'm also reaching out to one of my colleagues whose family lives 40 to 60 minutes north of Beirut. So now all of a sudden I'm like, well, they're both human. We're on both sides of this conflict. It's a little bit odd, but I want to emphasize the human piece of this. Then 12 days ago, or whenever it was, I wake up to the news about the Iran strikes. Same process. My sister, my nephews, my niece, a bunch of friends, including, you mentioned the Pia Zetzner, which makes me think of Reb Mimi Feigelson, whom I'm sure you know.
Of course.
I can't tell you how many times she gave Divrei Torah in LA that were from the Pia Zetzner. And then my next reach out was to our dear friend Manya and our new friend and my assistant Mandana, and Mandana just moved 6 months ago from Iran. And so I'm asking them the same question. Are you okay? How are your friends and your family? And the choice to reach out to, if you will, both sides of the conflict. Now, at the end of the day, in this particular case, there are not sides, because our friends largely, have trouble with the clerics in Iran. And so they're worried about their friends and family, but they understand the need to get rid of the clerics, even if they, like me, don't like war and don't like the risk of it. But the choice, well, ultimately what I'm getting at is the choice to reach out to both sides. Sure, it's craftsman-like in the political sense, because I'm reaching out to both sides. But ultimately, for me, it's the choice of faith that even if you're on the other side of the conflict, you can still engage and you can still have faith in the human connection, even if you have different disparate views. And that's a choice not to give in to despair.
Yeah. We're going back to this, very, very narrow opening. And it's often a narrow opening where we actually have a choice. Like, you chose to see this person as a human being who has some suffering, something painful going on in their life. You don't have to filter everything through my categories of belonging, my political views, and so forth, in order to just have some sense of empathy at a basic human level of, this person is suffering, or this person is, and what can I say? I think that what kind of Israel I would long for. So it's in Israel where people were able to expand their hearts and hold more place for more suffering, not because there should be more suffering, but because maybe if people could expand their hearts and open in a kind of unthreatened way their hearts to the suffering that someone is experiencing, they would actually facilitate a whole lot less suffering. I'm blessed to have siblings and friends who are doing the holy work to alleviate poverty or defend people who are in threat of being deported, by ICE or whatever it is. And that's not to minimize the importance of the actual work, but it is to say that lots of times looking at someone is an enormous, enormous, enormous act of bravery and compassion. And that's something that, that we can do more often.
Yeah, that's beautiful. Look, I mean, speaking of what we're coming up with, Pesach is coming up. And we just finished Purim. And I think that, like, for me, that evokes this whole anti-Semitism question. We as Jews are not seen as humans by some other people. That's my only explanation for how some of the positions that are being taken out there is explainable. That's what happened, 2,500 years ago in Persia. In the Purim story, Haman and his cronies stopped seeing the Jewish people as fully human and, different. Okay, fine. But stopped seeing them as human. That connects back to the Pesach story where Paro hardens his heart or God hardens Paro's heart, more accurately. And for me, all of this comes back to the song, because once you choose to constrict your views that way, you in a sense lose hope for possibility. And I think that we have so many different verses that talk about, I mentioned Kavel Hashem, hope towards God. Like, recognize that in other humans, there is this godly possibility. We're all trying to connect with someone bigger than ourselves. Don't oppress the stranger. All of these various verses. There's another one, opening your hand.
Right?
Yeah, exactly. Patoch tiftach and lo tametz et levavecha. All these things are just open yourself up to people. And like in my case, this all comes from my mother. We'd be on the train, we'd be on in a lobby, and whoever was there, she'd be talking to them, and my dad would be like, and you're picking up another stranger? And I think that inclination is not trained in people.
Yeah.
And if it were, we could really see each other and accept our differences.
Yeah. Well, first of all, let's just shout out to your mother, meaning like, I think that, no, really, like in a deep sense, right? Al titoshe Torat imecha, right? Like, don't abandon your mother's teaching. And in a lot of ways, those things that we learn, right, that you learned, that you had the merit to learn from your mother, just, the deepest instruction, right, is just the way that she behaved, right? Like we talk a lot as parents to our children, and, that's talk is cheap, right? They always are masters at finding, the discrepancy between what we're saying and how we're actually living our lives. So, the deepest learning, you merited to have a model for what it is to see someone. I'll say a couple of things regarding what you said about Purim. So I think, and there is this moment and there's a kind of palpable sense of being attacked that one has in Israel that many times my Jewish friends who live abroad kind of are almost apologetic. Well, I'm only dealing with anti-Semitism, in the school system, and you're dealing with missiles, and I would just like to dispel that, just do not dismiss that sense of apologetic nature. But what I want to say about the anti-Semitism piece, and because there is, I'm saying that as a kind of apology for the fact that I live in Israel, and so I'm not experiencing it in the same way that Jews abroad are. And so, I'm kind of like, it's hearsay for me. But from what I understand of this just really horrible moment that Jews worldwide are going through, and the way that it connects to Purim. So I think that part of what's difficult, right, what Haman says is that the Jews are different than everyone else. And I think that there's the way in which people are not able to see, when we see someone, right? I see you as you are presenting or experiencing yourself, to the extent that I can, right? And I think that part of the reason, one of the deepest causes of anti-Semitism, and I'm fine by accepting Sartre's claim that anti-Semitism is the anti-Semites problem. I shouldn't be stuck trying to explain it or understand it. But, malasotus, we say in Hebrew, we're stuck we have to deal with it. So we'd be better off if we can understand a little bit. And my working understanding of one of the root causes of anti-Semitism is that we don't fit neatly into categories.
Yeah.
It's what thinker Zygmunt Bauman calls like allosemitism, that we are just not fitting easily into the categories that everyone else works with. And that's why they can't see us, right? Like when we see someone, we immediately filter them through the categories. We filter their actions and their experiences and their emotions through the categories that we understand. And if we don't understand how to filter we are not able to integrate and process them. And therefore they're a threat. And so they can't see us, right? Are you a people or you're a religion? Are you tribal? Do you belong? Are you loyal to the United States or you're loyal to Israel? Well, what if I actually, as a Jew, don't think that I have to make that choice? I'm just playing out one of the possibilities, right? There's a lot of variations of this conversation we could have, but we have those categories forced upon us. And I think that if we were to transition from Purim to Pesach, what I would say is the deepest, I would want to talk about, there's a lot to say about Paro, about Pharaoh, but what I would like to say is that the deepest lesson that I take from Pesach is ואהבתם את הגר כי גרים הייתם בארץ מצרים, that you shall love the stranger because you were stranger in the land of Egypt. Now, what's the stranger? The stranger is the one who doesn't fit, right? He's not part of us. There's a sojourner. He comes from a different place. It's a place that we don't know, a place that we don't come from. He doesn't fit in. And the natural thing to do in this world is I suffered and so you're going to suffer, right? I was, like when I did my residency, we had to stay up 3 nights a week. And so residents are going to have to stay up 3 nights a week, even if we have enough or we, right? That's the way of the world, right?
Right.
And the basic overarching command, which is commanded more than any other commandment in all of the Torah about loving the stranger and being sensitive to the stranger, is you experienced what it is to be a stranger in Egypt. Now what you have to do is not come out hating the stranger or not coming out celebrating when you have your own homeland and you have now strangers who are dependent upon you. You now have to find some way of transforming your terrible experience into something different, which is loving. And I will do something which I didn't plan, but it's kind of asks to be done, which is to connect it back to the song, right? Love's the wind, go set it free, right? Like the way in which you can set that kite free is through love. And love is a very, 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 I mean, this is obviously, the wrong thing to say kind of towards the end of our time together, but it's very complicated to figure out and define what love is. And I will say that about 4 years into my 5-year doctorate, when I was, still on Rosenzweig, and I realized this central part of the Star of Redemption, he talks about the way in which God loves the human being, and that the human being as a beloved then turns to another human being. That divine love of the human being is transformed into a love of another human being. And I had been studying the Star of Redemption for years and years, and I just realized, Leon, you can talk about it intellectually, but you will not be able to speak about it or write about it in any meaningful way if you don't understand at a deeper level what he's talking about. So I'm not going to be able to say what I think in some kind of, meaningful way right now, what that love is. But I think that love is this power that we have to really, really accept someone, right? I mean, in that sense, love, deep love, I think, is like you cannot articulate why you love someone. You simply love someone. And it's not because you do this, Shep, and it's not because you do that, and it's not because you have this quality. I simply love you. And there's a level of acceptance there. And if that can be your way of being in the world, so then I think that is, my midrashic reading of your song, right, is that is the power that can then release hope, from the tree.
Oh, beautiful. Beautiful. I don't want to respond because that's so beautiful. Mm-hmm. I will, however, respond by saying thank you, and by saying I usually end these with a bracha, and my bracha to you and to all of us is that we know love, and that love opens up hope, and love opens up connection in exactly the way you're talking about.
Amen, amen, amen.
That was so beautiful.
Thank you, Shep.
Thanks so much for listening. Special thanks to Leon for joining me, to Devin Schwartz for his help in producing this episode, to E-Rose for his help producing the song in this episode, to Jessica Chana-Sweetler for her help on social media. Check her out at Wandering Bookseller on Instagram and Facebook. To Liat Silvera for designing the podcast logo. Please check out the incredible art on Liat's website at liatsilvera.com. And to my wife, Shari, who helps me choose hope daily. You can find All You Children and all of the other songs in this song cycle on most platforms that stream or download music, including Spotify, Apple, YouTube, etc. Please post reviews of this podcast or the episode, preferably both. It really helps out. In the next episode of The Rest is Commentary, I'll be talking with my friend, tap guitar phenom, songwriter, and recording engineer Jim Wright. We'll discuss the genesis of this podcast, being the best person you could be, educating God, the importance of arguing with the right intentions, animism, the relationship between perception and reality, happy mistakes, and so much more, all inspired by Jim's thoughts after listening to Come Out and Play, inspired by Psalm 34. Please join us.